Welcome to another installment of Donning the Armor. This morning we will begin in Exodus chapter 13, verse 17. Then it came to pass when Pharaoh had let the people go that God did not lead them by way of the land of the Philistines, although that was near. For God said, lest perhaps the people change their minds when they see war and return to Egypt. So God led the people by way of the wilderness of the Red Sea, and the children of Israel went up in orderly ranks out of the land of Egypt. Now, we'll come across this a lot, and people question a lot of these things, especially when you start getting Leviticus and Deuteronomy, and you start seeing the Lord lay out rules for slavery. And you'll see a lot of Christians kind of steer away from the rules of slavery and say, well, slavery was different back then. And in a lot of ways it was, especially when Hebrews were slaves to other Hebrews, because they're more or less bondservants, they're debtors. So they were working off debt. Lots of times they sold themselves into that bondservantry. So in a lot of ways, yes, slavery was different, but there was still slavery of their enemies. We saw it already in Genesis when Jacob and his family took the women and children from Shechem after they basically genocided all the males after the rape of Dinah. So we'll see Christians try to tiptoe around these topics. But just as God's doing here, where he's saying, look, I could take you to the promised land quicker by taking you by way of the land of the Philistines. But I'm going to take you around that, towards the Red Sea. Now, granted, the Lord has something pretty spectacular in mind to put his children at ease and to show the world his might, to show that he is God. But also, God knows he's not dealing with a fully fledged nation. He's the laws of slavery, instances like this, we need to understand that God is dealing with a fledgling nation. God is perfect. He has complete and perfect sovereignty over all creation. He has perfect justice for all peoples and in all instances. He has perfect love for his creation. But when it comes to some of these things we see and we don't like thousands of years later because they rub us wrong against what we see as morality in our time, what we forget is that God is dealing with a fledgling nation. Israel is basically a toddler. And toddlers can't be forced into being an adult. They need to be weaned into things. We call them baby steps for a reason. Jesus told the Pharisees as much when they asked about divorce. What about divorce? Moses gave us divorce. And Jesus said, no, God did not want you divorcing your wives. That was supposed to be an eternal covenant. But because of your wicked heart, he allowed a measure of divorce. Because God tried to force on you his perfect vision, and you were too immature to carry it out, he allowed you some baby steps. So we're in a world of the Old Testament. Slavery is rife. Everyone is slaves. Slavery is a way of life for all and every people, including what the Israelites just experienced by way of being slaves. So God now needs to take his people in his law and baby step them. And as they grow stronger, he can now, through the prophets, push new rules on them and help them be refined. But a lot of the Torah is written to a fledgling nation who he knows he now has to walk by the hand each and every step, taking tiny little baby steps lest they stumble, fall, and end up right back trying to crawl on their hands and knees, back to where they were, back to being like the land of Egypt that he just brought them out of. God is perfect, man isn't. And the Israelites of this Old Testament time were incredibly far from perfect because they were toddlers, basically. And God was leading them each and every step by the hand. So as a Christian, you don't have to shy away from topics. It's just you need to understand the reality. And the reality was Israel as a nation was not ready to be perfect. We as a people are still not ready to be perfect. Our sinfulness still wins over. But they as a nation of people were definitely not ready. And we see them stumble every step of the way, trying to return to crawling because it's too hard to walk. And if you've ever had children, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And Moses took the bones of Joseph with him, for he had placed the children of Israel under a solemn oath, saying, God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones from here with you. So they are honoring what was asked of Joseph, what they had promised Joseph in 400 years before. That Joseph asked that he be returned to his fathers, back to the promised land, and now they are carrying that forth, honoring their oath. So they took their journey from Succoth and camped in Ephraim at the edge of the wilderness. And the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of cloud to lead the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, so as to go by day and night. He did not take away the pillar of cloud by day or the pillar of fire by night from before the people. You know, it's also, I've heard it said and seen that this pillar of cloud wasn't just a column, but also almost acted as an umbrella for them. It helped keep the beating sun of that wilderness from damaging them as well. I mean, I know they're Middle Eastern, but still, they're not exactly a bunch of white Irishmen who would burn at the first sight of sun, but still, that this would give them relief as they journeyed. Such is the love of God for his children. So moving on to chapter 14. Now the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, that they turn and camp before Pi-hahiroth, between Migdal and the sea, opposite Baal-zephon. You shall camp before it by the sea. For Pharaoh will say of the children of Israel, They are bewildered by the land. The wilderness has closed them in. Then I will harden Pharaoh's heart so that he will pursue them. And I will gain honor over Pharaoh, over all his army, that the Egyptians may know that I am the Lord. And they did so. So God's telling Moses, this is where you guys are going to camp. And Pharaoh had scouts. He's going to see that it seems like you guys are bewildered, that you guys are lost. Because you could have went by the land of the Philistines, and you didn't. And you took a different route. So now Pharaoh's heart's going to harden again. He's now going to harden in vengeance, and he is not going to understand my glory. He is going to reject me yet again, and he's going to come back after you because he's going to say, they're lost. We can go take them. We can go slaughter the rebellious leaders and bring back our slaves. And we can bring them back under our will. Now it was told the king of Egypt that the people had fled, and the heart of the Pharaoh and his servants was turned against the people. And they said, why have we done this? That we have let Israel go from serving us. So he made ready his chariot and took his people with him. Also he took 600 choice chariots and all the chariots of Egypt, with captains over every one of them. And the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, and he pursued the children of Israel. And the children of Israel went out with boldness, so the Egyptians pursued them, all the horses and chariots of Pharaoh, his horsemen and his army, and overtook them camping by the sea beside Pi-hahiroth, before Baal-zephon. So once again, we get to the point where the Lord is hardening the heart of Pharaoh, not hardening him into doing something he doesn't want to do. The Lord's glory has hardened the heart of Pharaoh. The Lord's miracles have hardened the heart of Pharaoh into what he wants. He wants his slaves. He wants vengeance for his child. He wants vengeance for his people. And he wants to once again be seen as a deity in the eyes of his people. He is now bested by this God of the Hebrews, and he wants to be seen as the Almighty One yet again. So now he is coming out full force after the children of Israel to overtake them, probably slaughter a good number of them, and bring the rest back to work for him. And when Pharaoh drew near, the children of Israel lifted their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians marched after them. So they were very afraid. And the children of Israel cried out to the Lord. Then they said to Moses, because there were no graves in Egypt, you have taken us away to die in the wilderness? Why have you so dwelt with us to bring us out of Egypt? Is it not the word that we told you in Egypt, saying, let us alone that we may serve the Egyptians? For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than that we should die in the wilderness. And this is why he didn't take them to the land of the Philistines. Because at the first trial, the first sense of real danger, they can no longer walk. They want to go back to crawling. They want to go back to being babes in service to the Egyptians. They want to go back to being beasts of burden themselves. Because there were no graves in Egypt, you've taken us out to die here in the wilderness? For would it have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than we should die in the wilderness? The answer to that, by the way, is actually yes. Yes, it's actually better for us to die in the wilderness with Christ in our hearts than to live a prosperous life to 90 in the world. Because nothing we earn we can take with us when we die. We will stand before the Lord, regardless of who we choose to serve. And we can only serve one master. You can either serve the Egyptians or you can serve God. There's no promise of longevity with God. There is no promise of earthly possession with God. There is no promise of material here with God. There is a promise of eternity with God. So it is far better to die young out in the wilderness with Christ in your heart than to live a long, fruitful, prosperous, materialistic life with the world. Because as Christians, we shouldn't be judging our success in the same way the world judges its success. They judge by things. They judge by possessions. I have this job. What do you do for a living? How much do you make? What kind of car do you drive? What kind of house do you live in? I know for myself, I don't judge success that way. I judge success by I have Christ, I have a wife I love and who loves me, and I have 2 unbelievably awesome children. So it's even one of those things when people will ask, well, what do you do? I don't care. It's not important to me. This program that gets seen by 6 people, far more important to me than what I do as a job. Because this relates to Christ. This is where I feel joy. This not only is my chance to go through Scripture for anybody watching or listening, but it's a chance to go through Scripture myself. This is my daily Bible study. This is how I feel closer to God. This is where I feel like He's led me to do. If it gets seen by my wife alone, then that is it. Because the success of this doesn't need to be measured up against the success of whatever anyone else does on YouTube. Because the success of this is just in the doing it. When people say, oh, I hate adulting. Man, to be the kid's age again. No, I'm happy being 42. You have no idea how happy I am being an adult. Being an adult is the greatest thing that has ever happened. It is unbelievable. I have the freedom I always thought I would as a child. I have a wife. I have 2 unbelievable children that I get to now rear and raise and guide in the ways of the Lord. I wouldn't give this up for anything. So what? I live in a row home in Northeast Philadelphia instead of living in some opulent mansion somewhere. I work a little bit above minimum wage job nowadays, or cost of living job nowadays. So what? I have so much success in life because I have what's truly important. And if I'm going to die destitute in the wilderness, that's fine, as long as I have Christ. Do I want it to happen? Of course not. But it's still better than having riches in the world, because whether people like to believe it or not, an overwhelming amount of people that are alive today are going to die. It's like 10 out of 10 people will die. The numbers are staggering, really. 10 out of 10 people die. The question is, where are you going to stand when you do? And I'd rather die in the wilderness and stand before God in righteousness than live in opulent wealth and materialism with the world and stand before that white throne. But anyway, continuing in verse 13. And Moses said to the people, do not be afraid. Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will accomplish for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall see again no more forever. The Lord will fight for you, and you shall hold your peace. And the Lord said to Moses, why do you cry to me? Tell the children of Israel, go forward. But lift your rod and stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it. And the children of Israel shall go on dry ground through the midst of the sea. And indeed, I indeed will harden the hearts of the Egyptians, and they shall follow them. So I will gain honor over Pharaoh and over his army, his chariots and his horsemen. Then the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord, when I have gained honor for myself over Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen. Why are you crying out to me? Go forward through the sea. It shall part, raise your hands, you will go across on dry ground. Dry ground. because I am going to see this through. The Lord will accomplish this in this day. You know, there are even some Bible translations that follow this false teaching. That they didn't cross the Red Sea. They crossed the Reed Sea. And the Reed Sea is only about 18 inches deep. So they waded across some water. There was no miracle here. Okay, well, it does say that all of Pharaoh's army drowned in the sea. So if they all managed to drown at 18 inches of water, that's still pretty miraculous. And two, archaeology's already proven that there are chariots and chariot wheels at the bottom of the Red Sea. Now, people who don't believe, they'll still say, well, they could have gotten there anyway. I mean, any reason they could be there. They could have gotten there in any fashion. It doesn't have to be this miracle. All right. But this miracle did say that they got trapped at the bottom of the sea. And they're at the bottom of the sea. So, I mean, when you have evidence and you're blind to it, there's only so much you can point out. And the angel of God, who went before the camp of Israel, moved and went behind them. And the pillar of cloud went from before them and stood behind them. So it came between the camp of the Egyptians and the camp of Israel. Thus it was a cloud and darkness to one, and it gave light by night to the other, so that one did not come near the other all that night. So, once again, angel of God is in the New King James capitalized, which lots of times is a sign of a Christophany. As I pointed out, Jewish commentators, of course, don't believe in Christ. So they'll say, no, this is either an angel or this is the Spirit of God. Now we know God is going before them in the cloud, in the fire. So basically what it's saying by angel of God is that God is moving that pillar from in front of them, showing them where to go, to now behind them to keep the Israelites and the Egyptians completely separated. That way it gives the Israelites time to cross through the Red Sea. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night, and made the sea into dry land, and the waters were divided. So the children of Israel went into the midst of the sea on dry ground, and the waters were a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. And the Egyptians pursued and went after them into the midst of the sea, all Pharaoh's horses and chariots and his horsemen. These walls of water would be so high that these Israelites would not be able to see above them. I know somebody has actually done research into how high they probably would have been. I have actually forgotten that number. I'm pretty sure I actually knew it back when I covered this back in the Bedtime Devo days, but I actually have forgotten that number. But it was high. It would have been that basically they would only be able to see sea around them and just above them a strip of sky. Now it came to pass in the morning watch that the Lord looked down upon the army of the Egyptians through the pillar of fire and cloud, and he troubled the army of the Egyptians. And he took off their chariot wheels so that they drove them with difficulty. And the Egyptians said, "Let us flee from the face of Israel, for the Lord fights with them against the Egyptians." So, my daughter actually asked this question when we were going over this as a family. How did they still follow them if he took off their chariot wheels? Well, it's more the idea of he made them loose. He damaged the framing. They were still able to move their chariots at times. And some of the chariot wheels that did come off were on the ones that they're still going to pursue into the midst of the Red Sea, the parted Red Sea. Now, some of the Egyptians were smart. They're saying, hey, look, we've already been through these plagues. let us just flee from these people because the Lord is fighting for them. Like, they're not doing anything and we're already having problems. Let us move. Let us just go back home and leave these people alone. Then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand over the sea that the waters may come back upon the Egyptians, on their chariots and on their horsemen. So as you can see, when the wheels start coming off, they're already in the midst of the waters. They've traveled in there and now their chariots are breaking down so that they have no escape. And Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and when the morning appeared, the sea returned to its full depth, while the Egyptians were fleeing into it. So the Lord overthrew the Egyptians in the midst of the sea. Then the waters returned and covered the chariots, the horsemen, and all the army of Pharaoh that came into the sea after them. Not so much as one of them remained. But the children of Israel had walked on dry land in the midst of the sea, and the waters were a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. So the Lord saved Israel that day out of the hand of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore. Thus Israel saw the great work which the Lord had done in Egypt. So the people feared the Lord and believed the Lord and his servant Moses. So basically, you have the sea parted, and as they're going through the middle, it crashes back together and sends the dead bodies back to the shoreline. And that probably wasn't a pretty sight to see. I mean, the Israelites probably pretty happy because those people were bloodthirsty and they were coming for them. But probably not something we'd ever want to witness. But once again, you say, why the death? Why the... Because that was the world. When wicked people only see red and see blood, oftentimes they are only going to be dissuaded in the same way. Sometimes violence needs to be met with violence. And the Lord is sending a message not just to the Egyptians, which some of them are going to survive. They're going to make it back to Egypt. They're going to tell the story. The story is going to go throughout the lands and the surrounding nations. And they're going to understand that these Israelites, they walk with a Lord that will not allow you to harm them. That he is going to strike the fear of God in the surrounding nations to let them know his people are coming into the land and they are not to be touched. That mighty Egyptian army was nothing to me. So your nations are going to be even less. So moving on to chapter 15. Then Moses and the children of Israel sang this song to the Lord and spoke, saying, I will sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and its rider he has thrown into the sea. The Lord is my strength and song, and he has become my salvation. He is my God, and I will praise him, my father's God, and I will exalt him. The Lord is a man of war. The Lord is his name. Pharaoh's chariots and his army he has cast into the sea. His chosen captains also have drowned in the Red Sea. The depths have covered them. They sank to the bottom like a stone. Your right hand, O Lord, has become glorious in power. Your right hand, O Lord, has dashed the enemy to pieces. And in the greatness of your excellence, you have overthrown those who rose against you. You sent forth your wrath. It consumed them like stubble. And with the blast of your nostrils, the waters were gathered together. The flood stood upright like a heap. The depths congealed in the heart of the sea. The enemy said, I will pursue, I will overtake, I will divide the spoil. My desire shall be satisfied on them. I will draw my sword, my hand shall destroy them. You blew with your wind. The sea covered them. They sank like lead in the mighty waters. Who is like you, O Lord, among the gods? Who is like you, glorious in holiness, fearful in praises, doing wonders? You stretched out your right hand. The earth swallowed them. You in your mercy have led forth the people whom you have redeemed. You have guided them in your strength to your holy habitation. The people will hear and be afraid. Sorrow will take hold of the inhabitants of Philistia. Then the chiefs of Edom will be dismayed. The mighty men of Moab, the trembling will take hold of them. All the inhabitants of Canaan will melt away. Fear and dread will fall on them. By greatness of your arm, they will be as still as a stone, till your people pass over, O Lord. Till the people pass over whom you have purchased. You will bring them in and plant them in the mountain of your inheritance, in the place, O Lord, which you have made for your own dwelling, the sanctuary, O Lord, which your hands have established. The Lord shall reign forever and ever. For the horses of Pharaoh went with his chariots, and his horsemen into the sea, and the Lord brought back the waters of the sea upon them. But the children of Israel went on dry land in the midst of the sea. So here we have the first psalm recorded in the Bible. We normally associate them with David, but here is Moses. The song of Moses to the Lord, describing the unbelievable and awesome victory he had over Pharaoh and his armies. But it doesn't end there, because then Miriam, the prophetess, the sister of Aaron, took the timbrel in her hand, and all the women went out after her with timbrels and with dances. And Miriam answered them, "Sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and its rider he has thrown into the sea." The joy and exultation of the Lord in the time of salvation. They came up against it. They were afraid. They were asking why you'd sent them to die. Then you saved them, and nothing but heaps of praises and happiness and joy. The attitudes of a toddler. The everything is the end of the world when something doesn't go their way. But nothing but, "You're the best, Mommy, you're the best, Daddy, you're the best daddy ever," as soon as something does go their way. A fledgling nation that would grow, would fall, stumble, be regrown. Something that doesn't happen throughout history. Nations do not stop being nations and then come back. But Israel has done it multiple times at this point. A nation smaller than New Jersey, or about the size of New Jersey, but the whole world's eyes to this day are peeled to that one nation all the time. But we have to look forward to what they saw and what we have to look forward to. You in your mercy have led forth the people whom you have redeemed. You have guided them in your strength to your holy habitation. 15:13. That is what we have. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, loved all of his creation, so that them who believed in him is redeemed. When we put our trust in him, we are redeemed in his righteousness. And by his strength, not ours, by his strength, his mercy, his grace, his perfect love and perfect justice, we will be led into his holy habitation. It's a wondrous promise. And it's an even better future. But that's where we'll end off for this morning. I hope you found this fruitful. I hope to see you again next time. But until then, be blessed.